Good morning, everybody. Are you all deeply immersed in the process of your life? I thought briefly it would be helpful. There's some folks going to be leaving pretty soon to talk a little bit about the journey of embodiment that we are making. In one sense, this is a lineage alongside other lineages, other Tibetan lineages in Zen, Chan, Korean, Zen, Vipassana, Southeast Asian forest Buddhism, and so on. But in another way, it's operating on a different level from most of them, and therefore it's not a competitive situation. We're doing something a little bit different. And what we are doing here can be used by anybody, Buddhist, Christian, anyone, because it is providing access to the direct experience of your tradition. I talked the other day about map and territory. Territory is the life force and how the life force expresses itself. Territory is the actuality of what is. And the one of the things the human person does is create maps about the territory. But as I've said, one of the problems is we then take the map for the reality and we lose touch with the territory. We lose touch with the actual experience of life. And sadly enough, many spiritualities either largely or to some extent prioritize the map over the territory, religions of the world. And then, attaining salvation means that you act according to the map, and it loses touch with the actual experience. And many of us in many, many different traditions who come here, one consistent theme I hear all the time is everybody talks about all this stuff, but it's not happening. It's not real. I don't have the actual experience of transformation, fundamental transformation that everybody promises. And so our thing isn't, creating another map. I hope you understand that. It's not creating a map. We're not interested in creating another map. What we're interested in doing is connecting with the territory. And there's a somewhat of a map that's been created, but it's more a map of practices and a map of the way in which the human person unfolds. when they begin to connect with their own life and their own direct experience, which is the 6 yanas. But that's temporary, it's training wheels for you. Those are training wheels. And at a certain point, you won't need them anymore. And you can live in the territory fully of your own life. The thing about the 6 yanas is the 6th one is that you are in the territory of your life and you are the territory of your life. And it's not that you know how to do it. It's that there isn't any more you that's trying to do it. The surrender has gone to such an extent that you have surrendered to the unfolding flow of life moment by moment, and you're not in opposition anymore to who you are, to your inspiration, to what needs to happen in your life, to what the universe needs from you. You become transparent to it. And the need to have an independent position, an ego stance, a self-image, separate from that process is no longer there anymore. That's what full embodiment means. It means that we don't need to be in opposition to our life anymore. So there are, as I mentioned, there are many people who are making a parallel journey, or they're doing things that are similar or could be very helpful to us out there. And I want to clarify that sometimes we feel that when we're part of a lineage, and I'm saying the obvious, to this group, it's definitely bringing coals to Newcastle situation, because you already know this, but we often feel that, or we're told that practicing a lineage means that we shouldn't have anything to do with any other stream of teachings, which is, in my opinion, ridiculous. It's ridiculous. What kind of nonsense is that? Anyway, it's what's going on out there. At the same time, the other extreme is, well, it doesn't really matter, I can do anything I want to and go anywhere and study with anybody and I'm totally open. And that's also very, very harmful point of view and self-destructive. As we always say, we need a home base, and the home base here is the body. And the journey that the body makes once we connect with the body and we begin to listen to the inner directives of our life, whatever they may be, and as you know very well, and I know very well, the inner directives are rarely what we expected or what we want. But of course, they're ultimately what we're looking for at the same time. That's the home base of this lineage. And anything out there that serves that is good. And I bring it up because a couple of notes said, what about therapy? There's a lot of therapy out there that is really going in the wrong direction, and I totally agree with that. So I'm really glad the folks who pointed that out mentioned it. My general rule of thumb is that if a therapy is, somatically based, then it's worth looking into. I think talk therapy without the body is not helpful because, it could be helpful, but it's not really going to serve what we're doing, because no matter who the therapist is, if the therapist is working from a map mainly, then you're going to have to deal with the map. It's another map you're going to have to deal with. And you're not getting what you really need, which is a deeper insight into your own process. So there are a lot of somatic therapies around, and even within those, though, you have to find, somebody who gets it. It's like any therapy. There can be a very good approach, but the individual practitioner isn't really up to it. But my experience has been in the somatic therapies, most of the people are, fairly well trained, the ones that I've met, and, they can be helpful. And, I mentioned Hakomi as something that I've been studying for 10 years, but also there's somatic experiencing of Peter Levine, So very wonderful. And focusing, which isn't always regarded as a therapy, focusing of Eugene Genlin, which has been it's very parallel to our somatic descent. I mean, there are a lot of differences, but those would be three examples. One person wrote a note and said, why don't you introduce some Hakomi methods here? And what I want to say is, we are doing Hakomi. This is Hakomi. But it's Hakomi with a much bigger range of expectation, let's put it that way. And there are Hakomi people that are incorporating what we're doing into their therapy. So it's a two-way street. You know, I have, over the last 10 years, very much been influenced by Hakomi, and a lot of my language and a lot of the practices we do are deeply inspired and, you know, helped by Hakomi. And then you will meet more and more Hakomi therapists now who are using the kind of specific body work that I teach and incorporating into their EMDR and their whatever else they do. So, but I think the key point for you is just, you know, use the body itself as the litmus test. If you're wondering if somebody could help you, or somebody might be able to, help you get over a block, because sometimes we actually need a higher level of personal interaction with someone who's going to like nail you. You know what I'm talking about? And like week after week or month after month after month, they're going to just go, what about this? What about this? You know, that kind of accountability, not in a general sense of the journey, you know, which the Sangha provides and the teachers provide, but more in terms of our specific issues. If we have, you know, an issue of being too clingy in a relationship, and we really want to work on that. We want to work to develop our own voice, our own independent spirit, our own upright, independent spirit, as Undra says it. We might need somebody to help us if we have a problem that we get irritated and angry, and that really sort of creates a big fissure in our relationships. We might need somebody, you know, to really help us deal with that particular issue. So, just to clarify that point about therapy. Another thing that I want to mention is drugs, and I'm just giving you my impressions from working with students, and I think, you know, in me there's some regret that during the 60s and 70s, when everybody was like stoned and tripping, I was in a library at the University of Chicago, so I kind of missed the whole thing. But I do, I work with a lot of people, and I'm really deeply respectful of the kinds of transformations that have happened for people, that have really brought them here, actually. Opening people to a much bigger view of reality than maybe what they had. And drugs can be helpful, and I know there are people here that, ayahuasca or peyote or some of the others, might be part of your annual cycle. But there is a very, very, very important point that I want to mention here for everyone to think about. My sense is that what happens, even with the heavy-duty spiritual drugs that are not part of, if you live in the Amazon and you're part of a community, that's a very different situation. But if it's like you go for, 3 or 4 or 5 days, a couple times a year, and then you come back here and live in this society, and you don't have the kind of support, you may have a community, but you don't have the kind of support that people do in the traditional societies. What tends to happen is drugs don't, what happens in the body work that we do is as I said, your habitual patterns of disconnection are what we're working on, so that you can become more and more present and more transparent to the territory of your own life. And drugs may abruptly and artificially open you to the territory, but then you're back in the map. And most people that I know, drugs really don't help them create an integrated and unified personality. They don't open, I haven't seen research, but I bet that the kinds of transformations that happen through the kind of work that we do, where the neurological connectors between the thinking mind and the body really develop and change and develop even additional pathways, I bet that doesn't really happen with drugs, because it can't, because you take drugs and then you're not taking them. So I'm not saying they're a bad thing, but it's not a substitute for what we're doing. And sadly enough, there have been a few students who have considered, as one student said, hey Reggie, ayahuasca, it's a lot easier taking ayahuasca than it is relating to you. And I'm a metaphor for the lineage and the practices and everything. So, just very briefly, we've already talked about the first yana, the body yana or the ground yana, and how that develops. And then we talked about the second, what we're doing here, which is really working on our meditation practice, where I hope you've been seeing in the practices I've been doing with you that the shikantaza posture is only a container. And that within that container a lot of things can happen. I think that's probably clear to you. Some people feel in the beginning that we give the instruction and there's a shikantaza posture and there's a shikantaza, experience, and that's just how it is. What the posture does is bring you into your body fully, and then we can really do some amazing work. And working with the lower belly, and then the compassion practice that we did yesterday, they happen within the shikantaza posture. And the problem with, just to give an example of trying to do compassion work when you're not in your body, is it becomes very mental. So in the, when we get to the Mahayana, most of us are familiar with a lot of the Tibetan practices, such as Tonglen, where you're sitting here and you visualize somebody and you send out light and you bring back their pain. And this is just one example, but over the years, many, many, many people, including myself, the practice is sort of okay. It sort of works, and sometimes it really works, and a lot of time it doesn't work, and it's very mental. And the body doesn't come into it. And the problem is, as we saw yesterday, human love is a somatic experience. It's not a mental experience. It's somatic. The body loves. The cells themselves yearn and long for life. The cells themselves are reaching out and yearning for nourishment, for oxygen, and most of all for connection. The cells are all about connecting with other cells. And then those groups of cells are about connecting with other groups, and then those larger groups connect. So the whole thing is about yearning and wanting, lusting for life, and that happens within the realm of connection, and that's what love is. It's a somatic experience. When we, in the practice we did yesterday, we came fully into the body and we began to, and we're going to do some more with it, we began to tap into the actual feeling of warmth and love that is our body. The nature of the body is to love. From the cellular level up to the totality of our state of being. When we approach the point in the journey where we begin to include other people more, we need to let the body do it and not override it with our ideas of what love is and with our mental gymnastics, as Rinpoche used to call them. Mental gymnastics that try to, kind of get to some kind of connection. We do, in the Mahayana, we do all of the practices that are found in Buddhism, all the main ones. We do the exchange of self and other, we do Tonglen, we do the four immeasurables, 6 paramitas, but they're all done as somatic practices. So some of you had mentioned, well, where does the ethical thing fit in to this journey? Well, that's where it fits in. There are two major approaches to helping other people in Buddhism. And I want to mention them because many of you may have run into them, and they're found in all the traditions, both approaches. One approach is, I would call the conventional Mahayana approach, where you're really working from the map back to the territory. You start with a map, and you do these, in the beginning, quite external practices, and people spend a lot of time doing them, and they actually, I would include in those even the monastic codes of conduct, the 10 skillful actions of the Bodhisattva, the 6 paramitas, the 4 immeasurables. There are a lot of things that people do in order to get back to the compassion. And that's one approach. It's the conventional Mahayana approach, and it's a good approach. It's not as profound, I think, as the other approach, which is the more practicing lineage, but it's very valid. I'm not putting it down. The other approach is articulated in the practice lineages, and I would mention this guy Hong Dru that as I've mentioned before. And here's the way he puts it. He says that we need to sit. He's talking about the body work, basically. We need to sit. We need to set aside all external involvements. We need to let the 10,000 things be. We need to take the big step backward. So now we're talking about the central channel. And we need to reside in the clear circle of brightness. And when we do that, all of the distorted relationships that we have with the world will drop away. And we will find ourselves in a completely effortless and natural and irresistible way, responding to each atom of dust in the universe with perfect appropriateness. And that is love. So the actions of the Bodhisattva for Hong Dru emerge naturally and spontaneously when we reside in the clear circle of brightness. And then you can do the 4 immeasurables. When you have that understanding, you can do them in a different way, a more direct way, a more profound way, a more experiential way. You can do the Tonglen, and those of you who continue on this journey, at a certain point, you'll be offered these practices, and you'll see that we do pretty much everything everybody else does, but we do it from this other point of view, that we begin with the body, and we begin with the openness and the vastness and the clear light of the body, and allow that to inspire and fuel our relationship with other people. So the journey unfolds. First, we do our body work, and like I said, most of us will be doing it our whole life, touching back in on the ground yana. We do our sitting, and we begin to understand and dismantle the exiting so that we're more continuously present. And then in the third yana, somatic descent, which to me is the most tantalizing and delicious, challenging, mysterious, and strange, except for the sixth yana, of course, of all the yanas, because there we begin to develop the capacity to read and hear the body's, I don't know what to say, life, wisdom. When you walk into the grocery store and you walk along the line of apples, the body responds, the body picks up every single apple and every single category of apple. And the body, and all the food in the store, the body is picking it up and responding all the way through. The body knows what's going on perfectly and completely, from one apple in one pile to some galaxy at the end of the known universe. It's all received in the body through our trillions of cells. Each cell is picking up this information. So in somatic descent, the third yana, even though we've had a lot of intimations about it previously, in the third yana we really begin to develop the capacity to be within the body, and in every situation, even if it's picking out an apple, seeing what the body has to say, and then following the directive of the body. When I said yesterday was it Zach, about let your body be your guru? Who was that? I meant it in a very literal way, that the whole process of life, living life, being in the world, being embedded in this infinitely complex network that is our life, that every step of the way, it's stepping back from the ego and tuning into the body and seeing what the body wants and how the body views things. And the interesting point, which I want to emphasize, is how incredibly difficult this is. I think in a way the third yana is the most subtle, except for, of course, the sixth yana. It's the most subtle of all the yanas, and it's the hardest to actually get, because the information that comes through isn't verbal, it's not conceptual, it has nothing to do with thinking. And some of us can do that. Some of us actually have that capacity already, but most of us don't. Most of us, it's really like learning, you're not learning a new language quite, you are actually learning a new way of communication that is outside the realm of any known human language. It's more fundamental. And you can't say that much about it. I mean, you have to actually do it. And I think those of you who have been starting to work with somatic descent, you know that it's shikantaza. So you're sitting in shikantaza, even though you might learn it lying down or in an easy chair, which is fine. You're sitting in shikantaza. You come to the back line, and then you move forward into the density of what we call the mid-body. The density of your organs and your blood flowing and your heart beating, and it really is like descending into a realm that is infinitely alive and complex, but cannot be thought about. And you wait for something to happen, and sometimes something happens right away, and sometimes one of the most powerful somatic descents I ever did lasted for 3 days. It was over in our house, and something had really come up that really flattened me. And I was going, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on for 3 days. And then something really happened. So, one of the key points about the third yana is that it's very, very interesting because it's less technique oriented. Once you get into the body, you're just sitting there and you just wait. And you wait and you want to think about it and you want to make up something up, and you just have to keep coming back and surrendering into the darkness of the mid-body. And over time we develop the capacity to live our life in a very, very different way. The first 2 yanas get us into the body, and they show us how to meditate. But the third one teaches us how to be in the world from the viewpoint of the body. That's where we really begin. That practice is intended to help us live our daily life and move through all the situations we move through. So I love that practice, and I also find it, every time I do it, it's such a mystery, and it's so difficult, and it's so unknown, and I don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes things happen, and I'm looking for something else. Sometimes you like, I know, I'm waiting for the body to say something, I'm waiting. In the meantime, the body's already saying something, and I'm not noticing. So it's very, very interesting and very wonderful. But you need the first 2 yanas to be able to do it. Some people try to jump straight into the third yana, and you really can't do it because you don't have the somatic presence yourself, and you also don't have the ability to be present. You're hijacked all the time. You don't know how to actually be. But once you've learned how to really be in your body, and you've learned how to stay with it, then you can do this to great effect. I've been talking about eating disorders, and somatic descent is how you work with eating disorders, or really any addiction. So with eating disorders, when you're hungry, you ask the body if it's hungry. And 9 times out of 10, the body's not hungry. The body goes, no. You may feel a little bit physically hungry, but the body goes, I don't want anything now. I don't want any more food. You're fine. You're doing good. And it relieves what it does is immediately undercuts that traumatized kind of hunger, that addictive kind of hunger that I was talking about the other day. So I can't say enough about the third yana and how wonderful it is. There's a program coming out, is it out yet? The Somatic Descent from Sounds True. It'll be out in the next month. That will give you total and complete access to this practice. And I'm just very curious for everybody to try it. And as usual, when the Sangha really starts focusing in on things, and I mean the larger Sangha of Dharma Ocean, all these people around the world, even the live stream people, that's all they do is live streams. When our larger Sangha tries a practice and begins working on it, affects everybody. So that'll be interesting. So then, having developed that tremendous sense of embodiment, then the Mahayana, which I've already talked about, and really beginning to be with other people in a fully embodied way. And it's quite interesting that the fourth yana, or the Mahayana, or the yana of love and compassion, it needs somatic descent, actually. Because we need to, like what we did yesterday, we came into the body, we came into the heart, and I asked you, what is the point of view of the body on this other person? And that's, at that point, that is somatic descent. You're asking the body its point of view rather than your own ideas about the other person. So each of the first 3 yanas provides the ground for the Mahayana to be fully embodied. And then the next one is, what's the next one? What are we up to now? 5? Vajrayana, thank you, I forgot that. That one is the as one person mentioned, you have to have leather balls to do it. Only that person actually was talking about Datun. I want to be clear about that. But Datun is Vajrayana. I mean, you're getting all 6 yanas here. But in the Vajrayana, we fully acknowledge the obscurations in our language today, the unconscious emotional assumptions that come from trauma. We fully acknowledge that they're getting in between us and being fully embodied. Because you can go all the way, you can do all the practices, and you can go up through the Mahayana, and they're going to be these very deep assumptions about reality that we don't even know we have, still operating. And you could say, well, it's human, it's what makes our personalities. I agree. It does. Our personalities are basically it's a network of defenses against the totality of our experience. That's what the human personality is. It's a defensive mechanism, but it's also a very beautiful connecting mechanism and gives us our individuality. But at the same time, as long as we have an approach, again, as I was saying yesterday, that is defined not by the world around us, but by our own past karma, we're not free. And so what the Vajrayana does is it roots out these very deep patterns of avoidance and evasion that we call, trauma responses or trauma patterns, or you can call them complexes. It roots them out, brings them to the surface. So, we may, just without even knowing, we may have a fundamental feeling the universe is unsafe. And we may have felt that, from all the way back. We may feel, well, that's just how things are. But it isn't how things are. And as long as we are trapped in that assumption, we're not free. And mainly we're not free to be ourselves. Or we may feel that the universe is a battlefield, and that we have to constantly defend ourselves, and somebody punches us and we counterpunch. Or we may feel that the universe is fundamentally empty and vacant and meaningless. Every one of us has a different set of unconscious beliefs and assumptions about how things are. And the thing is, they're not real, they're constructed. But because they're unconscious, we don't realize their conditioned nature. So when we encounter situations, we don't encounter them freshly. We encounter them through the veil of what's in psychology is called implicit memory, which means I'm looking at you and I think I'm seeing you, but actually what I'm seeing is all the memories of my past and memories that come from the beginning of my life about, if you're a woman or you're young or you're old or whatever it may be. It's a memory, but I think it's really happening now. In trauma theory, they make a big point of, like a war veteran is having a flashback and thinks he's back in Iraq or wherever it may be, and responds according to how he did respond or should have responded in Iraq. And he doesn't realize this isn't Iraq. But the thing is, this happens with all of us all the time. We're always responding to situations based on memory, and we think we're talking to our mother, we think we're talking to our father, we think we're talking to some important person, some impactful person in our life, but we don't know that we think that. And we think the person we're talking to is the person we're talking to, but we're not. We're talking to our memory. Our whole life is consisting of one flashback after another. We're not here. We're gone. And there's this sort of fundamental, I would say, social consensus of normalcy, so that we all kind of get by as human people, and then when one of us steps out of the normal range, then we become noticed, and then somebody says, oh, that person is having a trauma response, or that person's in a trauma field, or that person is, implicit memory is activated. But the thing is, it's going on with all of us all the time. So we're never responding to the situation at hand. Now the interesting point is, the body itself, and I know a lot of people will not agree with this, but I'm coming from from a lot of personal research and a lot of experience. The body itself is not in a traumatized state. It's the relationship between the conditioned mind and the body that creates the experience of trauma. Meaning that when we do the body work, even on day one, we are actually dropping underneath our trauma fields. And that's very, very important. So in the Vajrayana, they have this very interesting thing where they teach you how to live underneath your trauma field. But what that does is it brings the trauma field into the open. Meaning, to put it in more experiential terms, this is I was talking yesterday to Sam about the shamanic death and dismemberment and death process. That's the Vajrayana process. You go underneath the trauma field, and the traumas come up, and they express themselves, and you live through them. And in living through them, your adult ego is more or less incinerated, for that period of time. And the trauma, then the energy of the trauma is released, and it becomes part of your personality, that comes out the other end. So it's very, very interesting. You visualize yourself as a deity. And what the deity is really, it's your body absent your overlay, your conceptual overlay in your conditioned mind. That's what the deity is. When you do that, then all the stuff from the very beginning of life begins to bubble up, because you're not pushing it down anymore with your adult ego. So the Vajrayana is it's very, very challenging, but it's also, they say, if you do the Vajrayana, enlightenment in one lifetime. You read that in the Tibetan text, and that's what they're talking about. If you just do the conventional Mahayana, then you can they say it's going to take you billions of lifetimes to achieve enlightenment. But if you do the Vajrayana, if you're willing to dig into the depths of your own obscurations and your own traumas, and you're willing to make room for them to express themselves and release themselves, enlightenment in one lifetime. It's been very, very interesting, Hakomi work, and especially Peter Levine's work. His thing is the body always, it wants to release and resolve trauma. And the only reason it doesn't is because we are trying to stay in control all the time, and we do not let the prisoners come up from the deep, dark dungeons. We don't let them come up because we're too threatened. But in the Vajrayana, in the whole somatic lineage, we're providing such a sense of grounding and stability and depth and confidence, really, at a very deep level, that we can tolerate the upflow, even though it's very, very painful. So we're becoming more and more tuned into the body, and releasing all of the things that get between us and the limitless vastness of our human experience. And then the sixth yana, you let go of your techniques completely, and you surrender into the flow of your own life, which you discover, well, you've been discovering it all along, but it's not the flow of your own life, it's the flow of life. And what you are is completely impersonal from a certain point of view, meaning you still have a personality, but it's a personality that has no boundaries. What they say in the Vajrayana of such people, these are the people that the Mahasiddhas, these men and women. In Taoism, it's the 8 immortals, if you know about them. In Chan Buddhism, it's the 12 or the 16 arhants. These are all basically the same prototype. These are people that are so stripped down to the fundamental core of life that nothing can be said about them and nothing can be predicted about them. They simply respond to situations completely in terms of what those situations need. You can't pin them down at all, ever. They're so far beyond any kind of even human concept. They become expressions of the process of life. We become that. We, one of the questions was, aren't we working with all 6 yanas here? And the answer is yes. And we have, even though we have to train in meditation, we have to train in somatic descent, we have to train ourselves. But they're all 6 are always going on. And I know people here have had and will have experiences of the 6th yana, that complete freedom where there is no impediment whatsoever to the infinite vastness of your own incarnation. Your incarnation is now, as I said the other day, is coextensive with the universe. You realize that your incarnation is the totality, really. That's who you are. And there's this little pool of consciousness or awareness at the center that is able to behold the totality of your own life. So it's a very vast vision, a very fantastic vision, and one that we can't get our mind around. We can't even think about it. And that's why we have a community and teachers, and we go step by step, and we work together, and we hang out, and we have fun. Because there is no map out there. There's only this life, and this unfolding in this moment that we have together. And pretty soon we don't even need a map. And then later we don't even want a map. And if somebody comes along with a map, we just strike a match, and up it goes. And that was Chogyam Trungpa's, I said the other day how terrifying he was, because that's what he did basically. You came in with a map, and he came in with a match. I'm going to come back and revisit the in-breathing, and my idea is we're going to make a journey with it, from now to the end of Datum. Every second or third day we'll come back around. One thing, almost at the level of housekeeping, a couple of people have asked, they said, I've been to retreats where we weren't allowed to make eye contact, and we were encouraged to restrict our food, restrict our sleep, and there was no talking at all. Like, you guys have talking like once a week, is that how it goes? And you have groups too, right? Once in a while. And why don't we do that here? Because that's been very supportive to me in my retreat. And that's a really good question. And the short answer is because we want you to experience your neurosis. It would be really easy for us to say no eye contact, but then you wouldn't get to be triggered. We could encourage you to restrict your food, but then you wouldn't get to experience your eating disorder. And the other problem is when we have too many rules in a container, then people get into following the rules, and then they get into feeling they're good. And we certainly wouldn't want that to happen, would we? I think I may have mentioned this, but Rinpoche, even in the early 70s, we all came in with our expectations about what a spiritual retreat should look like. And there was one thing that we all shared, which was spiritual teachers do not smoke. And they do not drink. And they definitely don't have sex with their students. And he kind of looked around the room, and he kind of saw how it was. And whether it was something that concrete, or whether it was just, like a really good spiritual person restricts their food and never, they don't ever eat anything. He always had a way of kind of catapulting you out of what you thought and what you wanted and what you expected. Do they do the Chogyam Trungpa chant at the end of the day? Where it says disrupt our expectations? I mean, that's kind of what this lineage is about. And it certainly was what he was about. And yet we need a container to the point where the discipline of the Sangha isn't disrupted. In other words, if we didn't say, please stay on the land, please come to every sitting, please do your rota. We have a whole container here which many of us find very claustrophobic. If we didn't have that, then the practice wouldn't go forward. But if we have too many rules, the practice also doesn't go forward. We're just sitting here being good students and doing our practice, and that's not helpful. You need to experience, we need to experience what a complete and total mess we are, fully and completely. And that mess is the territory of our life, or our actual life. And of course, it's only from ego's standpoint that we're a mess. When we experience the totality of who we are, everything is included, and it looks like terrifying chaos. When we look at our life in its totality, in the beginning it looks like terrifying chaos. And there needs to be room for that experience. And then we need to begin to gradually make friends with all of the things in our life that don't fit into our map. So, I just thought I'd throw that out there for your rumination. And perhaps what I've said has triggered a lot of people here, and that's good. Okay, folks, let's lie down and get to it.